Welcome to the Veteran Business Community Podcast, where we're talking with James Jensen from K6 Consulting. We talked to James about why he went to Duntroon and then left again to go back to Singo as a digger, his journey through 1RAR and ultimately the SAS, where he did many deployments with that amazing fighting Australian unit. We talk about his experiences with the unit, his transition, and his leadership models, which formed K6 Consulting. A really cool episode with an amazing Australian. Stick around and have a listen. James Jensen coming up. G'day there, everybody. My name's Pete Liston, and welcome to another episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast, where today I've got James Jensen from K6 Consulting. G'day, James.
Thanks. G'day, Peter. How are you?
Mate, I'm really well. Now, you're one of these people that I started following on LinkedIn, and it's just sort of, hopefully that's a good thing for me to say. Just, I was really curious about the kind of stuff that you were posting and actually reached out and connected. Because I reckon you've got a pretty good story, and I'd love to share a little bit of it today.
Yeah, no, I'm glad the LinkedIn stuff is getting out there a little bit because it's a lot of work, but it pays off sometimes.
It's a lot of work, and we don't actually know what it does. But mate, you caught my interest, so that's a very low bar to jump. But let's see where we go from there. Hey, mate, tell me first of all, where did you grow up in the world?
I grew up in a small town in Victoria called Emerald, so up in the Dandenong Mountains. So grew up there
Puffing Billy territory, isn't it?
It's the only reason anyone knows Emerald, and it's a bit of an embarrassing way. It's not as bad as the plant farm that used to be there that everyone knew, but yeah, Puffing Billy's the main attraction there.
Actually, I got one of my best mates who lives underneath the Puffing Billy track, so if I told you his street, you'd probably know where it is. But
Yeah,
mate, beautiful part of the world up there.
Yeah, it's stunning, and you sort of don't appreciate it as much when you're a kid, but getting back there nowadays, it's beautiful. Just back in the bush, I suppose.
Yeah, and I grew up in Katoomba in the Blue Mountains, and I sort of feel that there's sort of similar cultures, heavily in the bush, lots of that rainforest, pretty cold and miserable and wet a lot of the...
Yeah, a little bit. And I think it's similar to where I am now. So I live in Mansfield now, and it's a small, nice community. Mansfield's a bit warmer and a bit dry, which is nice as well, but they're beautiful places to live.
So mate, when did you join the army and why?
I joined up in 2003, and it had always been on my mind because the sense of adventure is probably what attracted me to it. But funnily enough, I still remember in year 11 waking up in the morning with my mum telling me that someone had attacked America. And then turning on the TV and seeing the September 11 unfold, and I had my year 11 history exam, I think it was, that day. And something, even as a 17-year-old, something about that really, really resonated with me about the injustice of it all and that. And that was sort of what pushed me, I suppose, to really take the step that I'd already been thinking about.
You had an unusual journey into service by swinging through Canberra for a little bit first. Tell us about that. Why the dark halls of Hogwarts or RMC first?
Yeah, look, the recruiters did a really good job when they came to school, and I'd said that I'd never wanted an office job, and I really wanted to be it's a bit of an adventure, and leadership had always been important to me. And they sold ad for an RMC as that. And so I did that, and I spent probably at the end, it was probably the midway through second year, during some of the army exercises, I sort of started realizing that maybe the officer path wasn't exactly what I was after. I really enjoyed the section level leadership. I really enjoyed commanding the actual team in combat in exercises then, and a lot more about how closer you were with the people. Yep. And then I spoke to a lot of officers, and the story was, because I always wanted to go infantry, and I'd already had SAS in mind down the track, but talking to a lot of the lieutenants and captains in the infantry, they'd say that being a lieutenant in the infantry is fantastic, but it can rapidly go downhill after that. Yeah. And I really wanted to have a bit more of a hands-on leadership role, so I actually applied to leave ADFA which was a very strange process, but effectively not knowing anything then as an officer cadet, I got sort of convinced to stay on and finish my degree.
As they do. Yeah.
Yeah. Like an officer's more valuable to them. But it was funny, they actually sent me up to, my OC at the time was fantastic, but he sent me up to 2 Commando, and he said, he had a friend up there, and he said, spend 2 days with them, just so you can sort of have an informed decision. So I went up to 2 Commando, spent the first day with the diggers shooting at the range, went out with the snipers, got to go with the snipers and shoot their guns. This is a 19-year-old kid dreaming about special forces. Had the best day up there, and then the next day I hung around with the OC and just really didn't do too much. So they might have thought that they were trying to convince me to stay, but it really convinced me otherwise.
We would have had a great experience, spending all day on ADFP 102 or, red penning some leave apps and, maybe getting a couple of charges for some diggers done, but I really love the fact, because we always hear stories about people transitioning from the ranks, to the dark side. I really love the fact that you've really set of who you are and why you are and what you wanted to achieve early, and we're really fastidious on that.
Yeah, and it wasn't easy, because I got to Duntroon, and first 3 months there, I said, hey, I'd want to be a digger. They said, do off-ops the first 3 months, make a better decision after that. Came back, said, I haven't changed my mind. They said, do def ops, we'll give you more chances to be an officer and see what it's like. So I just got more chances to be platoon commander, which was fine, which is okay, but you're sort of getting assessed a lot more, and which is a lot more pressure. Came back after that, haven't changed my mind. They said, all right, do the next 3 months. And at that point, he said, prove to me you've got what it takes to be a digger. I wasn't really sure what that meant, but I did very well on that particular course. And after that, I said, I haven't changed my mind. They said, we'll start the paperwork process, which took 3 months. So by the time I finished everything, by the time I was allowed to leave, I'd actually finished everything from RMC to be qualified as a lieutenant. So it wasn't easy, but it was something that was really clear in my mind about what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to start failing things and get kicked out or anything. I wanted to leave on my own terms. So at the time, it was really frustrating, but it also gave me some really, really valuable lessons. Like, the training there is fantastic. As much as it's the duty of all ORs to criticise that and just say it's about learning how to make cucumber sandwiches. The training was excellent, and it did set me up for success throughout my career. And
again, I'm just sort of interested here because, dropping the name, Dan Fortune was my first CO at RMC. Obviously, a guy that had come through SAS and done the reverse journey of yours. I was very lucky to not have much to do with Dan Fortune at all, particularly attend his office. What was that like, from, someone who's a very forthright, determined character, like the Lieutenant Colonel was at that time, being decisive enough to go against what he wants and say, no, this is what I want. This is no small feat to me.
Yeah. Looking back on it, I don't know how I did it, because he is, and I remember standing in front of that desk. It's a big desk, big painting behind it. Dan is an intimidating looking guy as well. And he was very much pushing me to go the other way. To be honest, I don't know how I managed to sort of overcome that, but I knew really what I wanted, and I knew what I wanted for quite a long time. I wasn't making a rash decision. I'd thought about it. I'd weighed the pros and the cons and everything about it. But yeah, I've run into Dan obviously a lot of times since then, and still talk to him every now and then. And it's good to reflect on that.
No, it's just a little moment for me, because it just goes to show the kind of character or determination needed to go that pathway anyway. And obviously that was, some signs that was the right thing for you. Okay, so you didn't go to the school of... Sorry, did you graduate as a lieutenant, or did you go straight back to Kabuka?
No, I didn't graduate as lieutenant. I was removed. I managed to get removed just before March Out Parade, and was offered. Got told you'll be going to Singleton. So I went to Singleton, which was great fun. Actually, when you've had 4 years of army experience, it's not quite as new or as big a game for you. So I went to Singleton, and then I was there for most of it, and then they ended up giving me recognition of prior learning for the rest of it, and and then I got to choose which battalion I went to.
Which one?
And that was 1RAR at the time, and the only reason I chose that is because they had the most deployments coming up. It's something that, again, that everything with my career has always been about doing the job. And at the time, 1RAR had just come back from Afghanistan, and they had another rotation lined up.
So, did you go to Kapuka or not go to Kapuka?
No, didn't go to Kapuka in the end.
RPL for Kapuka, because you got basic soldier skills from RMC.
Yep.
You go straight to School of Infantry as a private?
Yes.
Okay, got it. And then how long did it take you to get a hook? I don't imagine very long.
No. Well, actually, so when I got to 1RAR, I deployed quite quickly to East Timor, and I was straight away in a second in command role there without a hook. As soon as I got back from that course, I ended up getting my first hook then. Once I got back from East Timor.
Got it. Talk us through the pathway to go west now. When does these applications start going? And I imagine we're about 2006 or something like that, are we? 2007?
Yeah, so 2007 I went to East Timor, and after that's when I first was like, well, I think I'm ready. I was pretty naive then. I put my application in, but injured my knee just before, probably a couple months before selection, and had to get surgery. So I didn't end up doing selection that year, which was probably a good thing, I think. Yep. But the itch was there, and then we deployed with 1RAR, deployed to Afghanistan again for 10 months. And as much as that was an incredible deployment and made a lot of my best mates on that trip, and we had some incredible experiences, it sort of made me sort of see some of the issues and challenges that I was going to face with the regular army, with some of the decisions and the plans and the missions we went on. And I ran into some SAS people there, and I still remember we were with 1RAR. We were in a patrol house in an area which was actually quite dangerous. We were actually getting into quite a few firefights for the first time, which, again, being young and naive, was enjoyable because they weren't really crazy ones.
Yep.
And we're having a great time. And then one night we were sitting on picket, and all these helicopters flew into the valley, landed, and there was a fair bit of shooting and explosions, and the helicopters flew out an hour or so later. And from that point on, did not see a single Taliban in that area. So
could you see that from your FOB or wherever you were? So was it down in the valley in front of you, or you just saw it from a distance?
We were actually staying in a patrol house in the valley, in the green zone. It was something that was done for a little while there while they were building some of the bases. So we saw the helicopters come in, but didn't see any of the actual what happened on the ground.
Got it. But everyone knows what happened on the ground.
Yeah. Yep. And it's something that I reflected on a fair bit after my time with the SAS with Afghanistan on what we actually did and what we achieved. And one of the biggest things I think the SAS achieved, especially before I was there, is protecting the lives of the actual soldiers who were on the ground as well, because they had the ability to really target the Taliban in ways that we couldn't. We literally were not shot at in that valley again for that period of time there.
I sort of feel there is a career here before a career started. So a lot of people are lucky enough to get one or two trips. You've already done East Timor and an Afghan trip, but I sort of feel that your real career hasn't even kicked off yet.
Yeah, well, and it's something that actually really was. I think I got very lucky with my leadership journey, because I kind of I went into leadership positions and then restarted about 3 times. So I spent 4 years in Canberra training to be a leader, and then went in as a private. So I had to learn from the bottom up what was going to work for me as a Lance Corporal when you don't have as much credibility as what a lieutenant does when they step into a role. Mm. Then by the time I was in Afghanistan, I was a section commander. So I got comfortable with my leadership there, and then I went to SAS where you start again. So I was back to being a private again. So I think I really got to learn my leadership lessons three times over. I definitely had a great career with 1RAR. I really treasure the time I had there. So it was definitely an early career there.
How did you find selection when you went through?
Selection was horrible.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone that really can say that was a really enjoyable experience. I went in, I lost 16 kilograms in the 3 weeks. Definitely didn't feel like I killed it at any point of that selection course. It was really, really challenging. There was definitely times though when I was thinking that this is the right choice, which is what sort of got me through. And a lot of that was having interactions with the directing staff on the selection course. But yeah, the course was incredibly hard. It's designed to be that way, and it's a far more mental course than what people realise. Everyone thinks it's a physical one, but it's far more mental.
You get into the unit now at probably arguably the highest point of tempo in a long time. I'm imagining around 2008, 2009-ish.
Yeah.
What is it like coming into the unit that there is such a hive of activity? How long does it take to settle into the culture and be accepted and get through, your reinforcement training and all of that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The reinforcement cycle was 18 months of training, and that was a really, really enjoyable, rewarding experience. There was a hell of a lot of pressure and a lot to learn. You're drinking from the fire hose, but at the same time, you're learning from people who have just got back from Afghanistan. Some of our instructors had already done 4 or 5 deployments at that point. Mm-hmm. So you're learning from people that have been there, done that. And so you had the most open mind you could possibly imagine trying to go there. The culture was just completely different to what I'd experienced with the Army, where it was, you were, even as a reinforcement, you weren't treated like you were a rookie. You weren't treated like you were not as good as anyone else. Yep. You were automatically given responsibility. You're automatically expected to achieve certain things and show up in a certain way. And it was an incredibly welcoming, supportive environment, which, I was expecting even the reinforcement cycle would be a lot more what you sort of see in the typical Army movies, I suppose. Then for getting into the culture again, I had a bit of I deployed I think it was about a week after I got my beret. So after I finished the training, I deployed very, very soon after, with a small team that was isolated from the rest of the troop. So that was 6 months in Kandahar, in Afghanistan, without really getting to know the troop. So and then once I got back from that tour, most of my troop was already on leave because they'd been back for a few months already.
Just your troops back in TK doing jobs out of there, and you're in Kandahar doing jobs out of there?
Yep. Yeah, so we were doing work with some of the other partners and other nations in the area, which was, again, an incredible experience. But then I deployed again within 3 months, I think, of getting back to Australia on a SOTG, which is much more of that kinetic, what the guys had just been doing. So it wasn't really until after I got back from that trip that I really got to integrate fully with the troop. And so I'd already established a fair bit of credibility from having 2 deployments under my belt with that. But again, the culture of that troop, I was in 3 Squadron, and I spent my entire career there in the end. Yep. And I couldn't have been luckier. It was the best troop to be involved with. Some of the people, some of the leaders that we had throughout my entire time there was second to none.
Okay, so now we're up to 4 deployments. Have you taken a leadership position over in the regiment yet?
No. I've been given a fair bit of responsibility on that second tour, but still was in a sort of 3 IC role. Once I got back, that's when they were sort of getting into the leadership within the SAS.
I love this period of Australian history. I did my so I went as a supporting element, basically looked after a force extraction team for 2 RAR was coming out, and I believe 7 RAR was coming in. So I spent my time, in TK, but there was this other side of the wall, and I only got over to the other side of the wall, once with one of my mates, John Wing, he was the loggy over for 2 Commando. He passed away a few years back, Wingo. But it was certainly 2 different sides of the fence. And I've always felt in my career that I've almost been had this amazing front row spectator view of soldiering and army, particularly being, a loggy officer myself. Just, man, hats off to the men and women of the regiment that do this job. How are you feeling like you're at home now on this journey from, RMC, ADFRA, I'm not there yet. 1 RAR, I love it, but I'm not there yet. Are you finally home or settled?
Yeah, especially after that second tour. The first tour, there was some really challenging things that happened on that first tour. a lot of uncertainty, probably a bit of a lack of leadership in some ways as well. I wasn't probably feeling quite comfortable then, but after that second tour, that's when I was like, yeah, this is where I want to be. I want to be amongst these people doing jobs that matter.
And again, I'll ask this question as a spectator, but and we're not ragging on the ARA or the regiment. Both got great jobs, and I feel that, from my personal opinion, I don't think maybe the battalions of the Royal Australian Regiment were allowed to do what they do and probably warfight to their full extent.
Yep.
But what is for you the biggest difference, having experienced both sides of the fence, in terms of the freedom, the responsibility, and that command structure?
That's a really good question. I think my perspective anyway is of the biggest difference would be how much planning is actually collaborative within the regiment. Within the SAS, every mission is planned not just by the platoon, not by the captain, just not by the patrol sergeant. It's all done as a team, and a lot more of the information makes it up. And so you've got a huge amount of responsibility, a huge amount of say, just as a trooper.
Yep.
Whereas, so if we didn't agree with the mission, or we thought something wouldn't work, or was inefficient, or was too dangerous, we'd be able to speak up your voice would be heard. You'd be respected.
Yeah.
Especially with one area, like that trip was incredible, but man, we did some really dumb things, and we got so lucky that we only lost, we only had one KIA on that tour. And a lot of the decisions were being made at such a high level that people didn't understand the realities on the ground. So I think that, and one of the examples is we went to over the time we were there with one area, it was when the IED threat really started ramping up. So we'd go out on a patrol, and the whole way back, IEDs would be dug in behind us. And a plan was made high up that what we'd do is so one of the rules was you never walked in on the same way that you walked out.
Yep.
Also, you never walked out the same way you walked in, because you're guaranteed there'd be IEDs there. So the plan was made higher that we would patrol into the green zone. We'd patrol the route twice, the same route, and we'd stay the night in the green zone, which we'd never done before. And I don't think anyone had done that at this point. So we slept in a field that a farmer decided to deliberately flooded that night while we were sleeping in it. But when we got the orders for this, we called it Operation Tethered Goat, because we're going to be in the green zone, and there's going to be IEDs everywhere. But the risk mitigation that was put in, and the whole plan revolved around snipers in the high ground being able to watch into the green zone and kill anyone that was digging in IEDs. Yep. It was the middle of the fighting season there, so the fields were 2 meters high with green. The snipers could not see a single thing. And I remember sitting on picket that night in the dark, hearing people digging in around us, people digging in IEDs around us.
Scratching around and crazy.
Yeah, and we're talking to the snipers saying, hey, can you see anything? And they said, no. And sure enough, the next morning when we stepped off, we got blown up within 50 meters. We got blown up again shortly after that, and then the mission got cancelled.
50 meters, this is ballsy stuff. One of the things that's interesting to hear is, again, going through my time, you've got this 1/3, 2/3 sort of planning thing, where, hey, I've got my time, I'll use 1/3 of it and I'll hand it down. And then, hey, you use your 1/3 and then you hand it down again. But that kind of structure is, whereas it's nested, the guys who have the say have minimal time right at the very end.
Yeah.
One of the things I've always wondered is the balance between training and planning. Is there a trade-off? What is the trade-off between an elevated training and preparation period to be less reliant or have looser plans?
I think look,
because it's got to be a perfect world where we're like, hey, we plan it within an inch of its life, and we train within an inch of our lives, and those two merge into to some nice, beautiful matrix. Yeah. But where's the reality on that in the Special Forces space?
In the Special Forces, I suppose we've got a saying. Another ex-regiment guy talks about as well, is about being brilliant at the basics.
Yeah.
So we will know our drills, we will know our SOPs, we'll know the basic building blocks of every mission back to front. We'll plan our insertion, plan our extraction, but we also then train and plan for everything going wrong, because we know that it will. It's the oldest saying, but nothing ever survives that first contact with the enemy. Half the time, nothing survives the first contact with the ground once you get there. So I think you have that foundation where you train your people up in the foundations, the core, the basics of what you need to do, and then you create that freedom for them to make the decisions. If you look at how a battle was run within the SAS, it was run by the people on the ground in the firefight. They were passing information up, and they were more telling people what the decision was going to be. They were keeping people informed about what they were deciding, and then they were trusted to actually execute it. And I think that trust is one of the most, is second to none. And that comes from having a strong relationship between the officers and the non-commissioned officers. There's a lot of it, and some of this has been completely misinterpreted through the investigations and through things in the media saying that the non-commissioned officers ran the roost and all that sort of stuff. And it's just not the case. There was an incredibly strong relationship between the officers and a huge amount of trust between the officers and the non-commissioned officers. And everyone knew what their role was and where they fitted into the big picture. And then they were trusted to do it. The patrol commanders had the freedom, but if they knew that if the captain stepped in and made a call, that was what was going to happen, because there was a really good reason he was stepping in.
Mate, on that topic, I don't know what to think or how to even talk to people that have served in the SOTGs or the Special Forces during that period about the level of scrutiny and fire that you've come over since you've been home. I feel personally that until you walk in a man's shoes, it's hard to, make judgments about him. We've seen one of the members in our community, Rob Kilsby, was a very proud 2 squadron guy, served in Vietnam. We've now seen 2 squadron taken off the Orbat. I think it's still off the Orbat. I don't know if it's back. We've seen all of this, what I would potentially say demonization of the regiment. And I found some of the things really unusual, like the, taking some iconology down. And I'm really interested in the warrior, having not being one myself.
Yep.
As someone who, so one of the little things I'm always quirky about when I sort of think about Special Forces is, when you travel and you come back to Australia and say what your occupation is, there are people out there like yourself and others who could probably put warrior into that description box. Can you just share some of your thoughts and go as deep or as shallow as you like in what it's been like for you and your peers on this side?
Yeah, look, that whole process that's been horrific, I'd say. I'm quite happy to say that going through that interview process with the IGADF is the worst experience of my life, including everything I've seen through combat, through Iraq and everything as well. It's incredibly challenging because all the decisions that you made at the time and the sacrifices you made with the idea that was for the greater good, and it was as an act of service. And then when we're through this investigation process, what's often happened is people have reframed it, and they've tried to brand you as a murderer and all that sort of stuff. I wasn't someone that was put into that position, but some of my mates have been, and some of these guys are the best soldiers I've ever worked with, some of the best people I've ever met in my life, and they've sacrificed so much over the years for the Defence Force and for the country. So it was an incredibly challenging, it has been an incredibly challenging period. It still is. There's still people who don't even know if they're under investigation. They can't move on with their lives.
This is 10 years. Like, I've nearly been out of the army. Like, I don't know the dates or whatever, but I remember reading the first report when I was in uniform. I've been out of uniform for like nearly 9 years ago. And this stuff's up in limbo. And it just makes me like, again, I have no right to your experiences, but my listening to you talk makes me sort of flush and my guts sort of well up, because the people like yourselves that went back time after time after time, did the job that they were called to do. I just want to recognize you, and it's not right.
Yeah. Now, thank you. And I think you're right. You're right what you said at the start is you need to be in someone's shoes you need to know that, and even knowing the full context. I'm not saying that there isn't, like, I'm not saying that you should be able to do everything. You shouldn't. Rules of engagement are there for a reason. But the things that have been accused are just, a lot of the time, is completely unfounded, or it's just based off rumour. And you sort of touched on the start about the warrior side of things, and the warrior culture has been turned into this demon of a
Something
thing
less than a noble thing that it is.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not about that. It's the warrior culture is about being there for your mates. It's about having the courage to sort of to achieve the mission, and thrive in that sort of environment. You cannot thrive in that environment without having an element of the camaraderie that comes with the warrior culture, with being able to laughing in the face of danger and trying to be above that. There's one of the ex-regiment guys is absolutely brilliant with, he talks about the culture that we had there. And it sounds bad at first, but he talks about it as being a culture of shame. Now, when people hear that, it's like, oh, it's about shaming each other. And it's not. It's more about the self-imposed shame that you don't want to let your team down. Yeah. You don't want to let your mates down. You don't want to do something that's going to compromise the mission. And that's what it's all about. It's about having pride in the unit and being there to achieve the mission, because that's what we're there as servants. We are doing the missions that we're doing because that's what's been asked of us. Yeah. And having that warrior culture is important for that.
Well, mate, I appreciate you just sharing that. And look, I know that is it's a whole separate conversation in itself, but I think it's just important for me whenever I speak to people like yourself that have been in that situations to at least recognize it and to call it out. Mate, I'll switch back to soldiering. Let's go on, and we'll go through the continuation of your career. We'll get to a wrap up, and then I want to most importantly go to K6, because if you're listening to this now, you should be seeing the seeds of K6 and this model that you now do for a living through your business. So can you talk through the rest of your career, and ultimately, that's a pretty quick summary. I don't know if you did more deployments or whatever, but call out some highlights, and ultimately let's get to where and why we transitioned.
Yeah. So we had a little bit of a lull after that. After my second Afghan tour, that's when I did a lot of my promotion courses, specialised in being a JTAC, and because for me that was the job that was going to, again, or like what I was trying to get is more work. That was the job that was going to get me more deployments, and in line with that, I also learnt Arabic, and I spent a year living in Jordan, studying Arabic, which worked out well because while I was over there is when ISIS kicked off. So I got to be involved in that, in a few smaller things. Then also I did one deployment with sort of working alongside 2 Commando. Yep. And most of that was spent up at Mosul, recapturing Mosul from ISIS, which was a phenomenal experience. Again, quite challenging in some ways, and sort of seeing warfare at its full scale. That's Afghan, I wouldn't say was a full-blown war. It was for what Australia experienced for us, it was most of that definitely a counterinsurgency.
So I'm just about to ask that. Obviously, counterinsurgency, small team operations, company level, maybe in Afghan at most. How big would like brigade or divisional US push?
It was actually more of an Iraqi divisional and Iraqi army push supported by coalition forces.
Yep.
That was completely different. The city of Mosul was effectively leveled. Most of the major cities in Iraq that were recaptured had to be because of the number of IEDs that were there, how hardened the cities had become by ISIS putting fighting positions up all over the spot. Challenging parts of that was seeing how many civilians were caught up in it all, because there was no way to avoid that they couldn't get out of the city. So you're trying to operate in a way that was still achieving what you had to do, but try minimising that risk to civilians, which was really, really tough. Also got to do a lot more. I don't have a medical background. My specialty in the regiment was communications, but I did a bit of work in the casualty collection centre, outskirts of Mosul, when you had spare time because they were just swamped. So getting to do a lot of really interesting, or challenging but interesting things there as well.
But just in your spare time.
Yeah, I
spare time,
will.
I'll pop over, and it's just boggling the scale of this stuff that actually happens. And again, it's one of the things that I'm most humbled about is being a part of, and why I still do the veteran business community stuff, even though I'm long separated now, is just to sort of honor and support people in this next chapter, because this is like just amazing. I tell a story to my kids. I say one of my phrases I've got with my kids is you got to earn your stories.
Mm.
There's only one way. You can't tell other people's stories. You got to earn your stories, and it's just boggling some of the stories that you've been through.
Yeah, and that's something I feel that I've loved being involved with things that are significant in history, that we're going to look back on for whatever reason, and I like being part of that rather than just being able to see it on the outside, which is something that you got to wrap your head around when you do leave. Because after I went back to Iraq again, soon after that, working with the Americans and the British Special Forces, and again, just incredible stories, incredible experiences, and for me, that's sort of when my time sort of started coming up.
Mosul, 2016, 2017, you've now got probably time out of ADFA and RMC, probably a good solid 10, 12 years in the real army in some form or other. Are you starting to get an inkling of change?
But yeah, on that trip, I signed a retention bonus, and I had immediate, not immediate sort of worry about that. So that's when I sort of thought, oh, when am I going to put my time in? So I did. It was probably on my just before my last Iraq trip that I really started thinking about it, and I'd been doing a few leadership courses outside of the army because I did ragging on the course a little bit, but I did the subject one for sergeant course, and I was a little bit uninspired when it came to the actual leadership side of things. So I did a few leadership courses outside of the military and had been offered a job through that for one of these consultancies before I left. But anyway, so I did that one other tour, and that's the tour I really started. I was like, okay, I'm tired now. I was engaged at the time. I proposed to my wife and found out I was deploying the next day, 2 weeks later, which was good way to go from being popular to being unpopular very quickly.
Well, I was actually just, like counting on my fingers, you're probably up to 7 trips or something now. Were you with your partner through this time, or like the whole time? Or
No. So I ended up doing, but all in all, including some small ones, it was 10 deployments.
Yep.
My now wife was with me for the last 2, which still worked out to be about 14 months of time away in 2.5 years. Yeah. So it's tough on her as well.
When you mentioned you signed a retention bonus, if I can ask you sort of a couple of, should I have done it or not? Was it more a sense of timing, a sense of potentially mortality, or a sense of constraint in that thought, or lack of freedom?
I think it was that lack of freedom. That's probably something that's really important to me, is that having autonomy. And I think when I signed that, I was like, "Oh, hang on! Now I'm stuck," which I've never been stuck before. Yeah. Which was funny. Like, I'd always probably had another 5 years in me, but it was funny how that sort of shifted my mindset a little bit. Yeah. Just goes to show, though, that monetary bonuses don't retain people. It doesn't work in business, and it doesn't work in the army.
Absolutely. So when did you end up separating?
I was completely discharged in 2003, but I took a lot of leave. I had a hell of a lot of leave built up.
Must have had a fat leave book, mate.
Yeah, I was getting a lot of emails. Even on my last deployment, I was overseas in Iraq getting emails saying you've got too many days in your book, you need to fix it. And I was like, okay. Give me some time off in herbal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I took a lot of leave and spent that time working with another leadership consultancy.
Yeah.
Which was, and then that was, at that point, I'd made a decision that was my time, which was a really, really, really tough decision to make, because I had an incredible career. I absolutely loved it. My team was, it was the best team I've ever worked with. And I was so proud of what we'd sort of achieved and how these guys had turned out. So it was a tough decision to make, but it was the right one. It was definitely the right decision.
So, mate, I see here Kilo 61. Was that the name of the your unit or troop that you're in?
Yes, yeah, it was. So Kilo 6 was my patrol. It's pretty much the patrol I joined when I got into the SAS. So again, that whole revolution again of me as a leader, went from being a section commander to being a private trooper again. And I was lucky enough to spend pretty much my entire career in that team. So I was there from a trooper, 3IC, second in command, and eventually led that team when I left. So I ended up putting it as my business name because I couldn't come up with anything better for starters, and paid a marketing company too much money to come up with some really shocking options. And so it means a lot for me, and is also sort of a bit reflective about how I see leadership, which is that constant, it has to be something that's constantly adapted, constantly tried and experimented with, which I was lucky enough to get with K6.
Did you get out as corporal, sergeant?
Sergeant in the end.
Sergeant. Can you just, before we wrap up your military career and go into your business and next life, leadership at the sergeant level? Because one of the things that constantly comes back when I look at your content or I sort of see your pathways is leadership despite rank. You know, to be honest, when I first saw your stuff, I just naturally presumed you're an officer by the kind of the way you were speaking and the content around it. But I just want to break all of that, push all of that aside. That leadership belongs to everyone, regardless of, where they started or where they finished in the army.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. And I think leadership belongs at a trooper and a private level as well. The best thing you want as a leader is to be leading a team of leaders. Part of that is followership, but I think that as a sergeant within the regiment, you're not the highest rank by a long way in there. It's about how you can exercise your influence and build trust and build relationships. And the leadership at that level went beyond the team. So critical part of that is building a team that is a high performing team where you're getting the full potential out of your people, developing them to be future leaders within the organization. But then the other critical part of it is dealing with stakeholders, is working with, from my perspective, other departments, other units, contractors, civilians, and so on. Leadership goes beyond just leading the people below you. It's also about actually influencing the people around you so that you can be the most effective person in your role possible. And it absolutely does go beyond rank. I think that, especially within the military, rank. So I get mentioned a few times by businesses saying that the military builds great leaders. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think absolutely has the potential to, and some of the best leaders I've worked with were in the military. Hands down, some of the worst I've worked with were also in the military.
Yep.
One of the things that the military has, though, is a rank system where you are actually legally obliged to follow the commands of the person giving you the orders.
Yeah.
Which is a handrail in a way, because you can be a shocking leader and people still have to do what you tell them. And in the military, a lot of the time, what we're asking of people is physical effort to do certain things, to go certain places, where we don't need 100% buy-in from people to do that. But in the corporate sense, we need people 100% cognitively, mentally, and psychologically engaged. We want to get the full potential out of people. And to do that, we can't rely on rank. We can't rely on position. When you're demanding performance out of people, and we know that we can't demand 100%. Well, we can demand 100% effort. People won't give it. We can only inspire that and lead that.
Certainly not all the time relentless and enduring.
Yeah.
If I have a personal reflection on myself as a leader, I think that I came out of the military thinking I was a good leader because of the training and the structure and the rank. But on reflection, having run some businesses and having to lead in different ways, I don't necessarily think I'm that good, to be honest. As my personal reflection, not necessarily, how can I describe this? one example is in one of my businesses. In terms of the way that we were managing and developing the teams, I was far too soft, and I was far less mission and goal focused on what the business needed.
Yeah.
We were very lucky to hire a new CEO in who wasn't military, but he was he is a natural leader, and he's now the CEO of one of my other businesses. And the way that he is able to articulate what he wants, the way he's able to deliver it and drive performance out of the team, he's a far better leader than I am. He doesn't have any military experience.
Yeah.
And I'm also questioning in terms of this time in my life, how much do I want to lead, to be honest, versus being a dad and being a creator and playing basketball. So we've got to drop this military equals great leader stuff. However, if you've got those inclinations and you are a great leader and then you get trained by the military to be even better leader, that is where I think we're sort of leading to, but where people like you excel.
And look, hats off to the military. At least the military does train their leaders.
Yeah.
Most organisations don't. There was a survey done recently, and they found that most leaders are in leadership positions of responsibility for 7 years before they receive any form of training. And leadership, it's a skill.
Yeah.
It's where you are as a leader right now is just one point in time. You will evolve that. You should evolve that year after year after year, after every interaction, after every experience. Learn from what works, adjust what doesn't. So, yeah, I think that the military, at least it does train leaders, and it's absolutely got the potential to build great leaders. But yeah, it doesn't happen by default.
I just want to unpack that a little bit and it's probably a nice little segue, in towards the business conversation. Actually, just before we leave SASR, and let's switch across to K6. If you are sitting back looking at your life and your career as an older gentleman, is there one particular moment of your service that at this stage stands out? And for better or worse, one that you'd like to share to sort of probably wrap this part of your career up?
Well, so many things stand out in different ways, but as probably a segue into what we're into going into leadership, and not necessarily something that stands in a positive way for me, is some of the poor leadership that I did experience in my time. And I remember this particularly during one of my first deployments with the SAS. I made a mistake. It was a decent mistake. But it was also one, and at the time I thought it was far worse than what it was. Looking back with experience now, after 14 years in the SAS, it's inevitable that people are going to make mistakes. You're operating in such a tempo, in such a context and an environment where mistakes are inevitable. It's part of what comes part and parcel with it. But how that mistake was actually dealt with, how the lessons were or weren't drawn from it, that really literally set me back probably 2 years, I think, before I got my full confidence back and started feeling comfortable again in my position. And that's what stands out to me, because I realized the impact that poor leadership can have on an individual, and it can have on a team. That team that we had there was probably 5 of the most talented people I've worked with.
Yep.
But the team never reached its full potential simply because the leader was good, but left a huge amount of potential on the table based off how he behaved.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier about the positivity of the shame relationship with the unit. You know, in terms of how the avoidance, and you want to step up and always be there and always be at your best. When the inevitability of mistakes and errors happen, the time that it took you to come back, 2 years, was that purely a confidence or a worthiness part to be in that role? Certainly not a skill-based function?
Yes, pretty much it wasn't. But that was, that mindset that I developed through that mistake was largely done with based off how that was dealt with from the leadership perspective. But so yeah, it was definitely am I even in the right place? Like, should I be here?
Mate, this is fascinating, because obviously, now let's come across, to K6 and the evolution there. Well, actually, again, I'm jumping all over the place. Talking about, leadership ranks, where we are, again, I've got out of the military. I've run a couple of businesses, maybe accidentally successful, some of them through more fortune rather than good management. But I have not done leadership development or training post-military. And I think one of the things that I realized, particularly when it came time to hire the CEO, was I'd reached my limits, both as a leader and the opportunity that the business could succeed with me in that position. And I'm very lucky now. I've stepped out and I do VBC full time. But the reality of my shortcomings is pretty relevant to me in my success in that business now, and the ability to be able to let it go and let somebody else take the way. And I want to come into K6 in that in terms of where do we get this leadership development from? How do we now understand our plateaus, our glass ceilings, and be ready to punch through them again?
Look, I think that one of the key parts of that is what you've sort of mentioned at the start, is that having self-awareness and being able to have a bit of vulnerability and say, hey, look, I don't have the answer. I don't have the capacity. I don't have the knowledge to do this right now. I'm a firm believer that every single person can develop their leadership potential further. And look, and that's been proven through neuroscience and psychology as well. People, though, have got obviously natural strengths and natural interests about how far they want to go. Like you said that you're not sure how much you even want to be in a leadership position nowadays. Saying that, I think leadership applies into our personal life. It's into all of our hobbies as well. So having that self-awareness to realize that, hey, look, I've reached the limit, and look for other options. I thought I was a quite capable leader by the time I left the army, and I'll say I was. But there's things that I've learned since doing leadership training, doing leadership courses, or being exposed to other great leaders that I just wish I'd learned 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It would have completely fundamentally changed how I led in so many different situations. And when it comes to leadership, it's interesting that this is something that someone I used to work with talked about. A lot of people say I've got 10 years of leadership experience. But what we see a lot of the time is that people have got 1 year of leadership experience that they've repeated 10 times. Where I think what we want to get is we want people who have got 10 years of leadership experience where they've experimented, they've tried new things, they've reflected, they've failed, they've made mistakes, and they've built on top of those things and kept on going. Yep. So we're actually trying to get that genuine leadership experience, not just time in position.
Look, I think that's a really thought out point that I hadn't considered before. And it's interesting you say, like when I sort of hear myself say I don't necessarily want to be in a leadership business anymore, I sort of feel a bit of somewhat shame in saying that. I used to be in the army. I should be craving this kind of stuff. Yeah. But I think, to be honest, I'm a better follower than a leader. And where I'm very lucky with, particularly with my business relationships, is I've been able to surround myself with different kinds of people that are smarter and far more driven than I am, and I'm happy to work on a strategic plan with them. But I naturally need that structure around it. But then again, I've just started coaching an under 18 men's representative team in basketball up here on the Central Coast, and in that forum, with young men about to cross that threshold of leaving school and leaving home, I'm loving it in that forum. But in the business forum, I'm sort of bit done with it. Yeah. So I really like the fact that you reflected, like the whole of life experience, not just with that particular hat on. So, have you developed the way you do leadership training? Obviously, a rather unique patchwork that you've gone to build your toolkit. One of the things I'm really interested in is this nature versus nurture character traits of a leadership. Where do you see that coming? You said everyone can be built and developed, but where is the that nurture side of it comes from within who we are?
I think that's the starting point. And a lot of the time, even if you look at these people who are natural leaders, you look at them when they were younger, they were often in sports teams. They might have been a captain early on. Yep. They might have just been really good at what they did. And even if they weren't a captain, they fell into sort of an influence position. But saying all of that, we would say that there probably are people who are naturally disposed to leadership. They might be more charismatic. They might be more ability. They might be more socially focused and really be able to influence people well. But I would absolutely say that's the starting point. Some of the stuff that is on LinkedIn when it comes to leadership frustrates me, because you see these big posts about, are extroverts better leaders? Are introverts better leaders? Leadership's about behavior. And behaviors can be changed. It takes some people can behave in the right way unconsciously, and that's what happens over time. But for some people, we just need to make some of these behaviors conscious first, and then over time it becomes second nature to them. So I'd say that nurture is the starting point where people can naturally be disposed towards it, but how you behave every single day, we can change that, and you already do change that throughout your life anyway. You change how you behave with your family compared to how you behave with your workplace as well.
What about character? Where does character fit into this, and your own intrinsic values?
I think that it's critically important, because your values don't really change. What's important to you is going to probably be important to you for most of your life. They don't change a huge amount. So I think that part of to be a great leader, there is an element of character there. You probably have to have an element of integrity. You have to have an element of selflessness in a way. So character does play a big part and this is just my opinion and perspective as well, by the way. But the other side of that is you do see great leaders who are, like, I've worked with great leaders who are extremely motivated by money.
Yeah.
Like that's what's there, especially in the investment banking world. I've worked with leaders there who that is their driver. But to achieve that goal, they've learned to behave in a way where they get the full potential out of their people. They're really good at building trust. Their motivation is still for their own promotion, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's still, yeah.
A third factor here. We've talked about, nurture, what it's like, character. What about ego? Because when I see you, so for me, I probably was driven by ego through the military onboarding process, because I wanted to be an officer. Okay, I thought I was good enough. I thought that was a position of something that I wanted to achieve. The stature and that kind of thing. On reflection, on this side of the military, I think I would have been a far better soldier. If I'd been able to push my ego aside, I think I would have enjoyed that career a lot more, rather than take this career, which had the sort of status and that with it. So that's because also I was a farmer before I joined the army, so I was nothing special before I went in. And I guess when they said, "Oh, hey, you can be an officer," I thought, that probably self-inflated ego probably wasn't the best fit. However, you were able to manage and temper that super early, because you knew that ego wasn't a part of it. You knew where you wanted to be, and then you had a natural maturation into your leadership process. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. First off, I'd say that I think farmers are some of the most special people in Australia, to be fair. And I think that that's a hell of a lot of credit goes to them. Ego, I've read a couple of different thoughts on it, and I sort of agree with that. Ego is everyone has ego, and it is really important for us. It's what drives us to be.
Not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. It gets put as a bad thing. It's what drives us to achieve our goals. It's what drives us to take that next step. What we need to balance it with, what I believe is one of the most important questions that leaders can ask, and that probably most people can ask, is what's my goal? If so, people have got a goal, and we can look at this at a micro level, where we look at having a performance management conversation with someone, or having an argument with someone within the organization. Ego kicks in, and an emotional goal kicks in, and my goal becomes, I want to prove them wrong. I want to win the argument. Whereas if we actually take a step back and look at what the actual goal of this conversation is, it's what's the best way forward. It could be, how do I build and fix this relationship? How do I build trust with this person and make the best decision for the organization? And that's where that self-awareness and self-regulation sort of kicks in, to put our ego aside and act in the best way for the organization, or act in the best way for the actual goal I'm trying to achieve. The goal with a capital G, not the emotional goal that kicks in often.
Yep. Because this is where you talk about leadership being a profession, not a position. And a position for me is rank. You're the GM, or you're the CEO, or head of department, whatever. just unpack a little bit of that, because if it's your profession, it's more related to your individual journey, or this is who I am, this is who I'm becoming.
Yep. Look, so that's it. What I try and do with an organization is create groups, cohorts of professional leaders. So they are leaders who can step out of their technical role and have now got their full focus on getting the full potential out of their teams, out of their people, and out of the processes within an organization. So it's not about now doing the work. It's about using the people within the organization and motivating them and getting the full potential out of them to achieve what we want. If we look at most people are professional in some sort of technical field before they come into a leadership role. And one of the hardest steps is to actually push that aside and now look at, hey, it's not my job to do the work anymore. It's my job to get the full potential out of my team so they can do it better than I ever could.
Yeah.
So that's where that professional leadership side comes into it. And I think a key part of that, when so many people talk about getting high performance organization, high performance teams, how we even defined full high performance within the SAS, it goes beyond achieving great results sustainably. Like that's a key part of a high performance organization, great results over time, repeatably. But we can achieve that if you've got highly talented people in a really good market, really good industry. Well, you can achieve that while still getting 60% out of your people. What we're trying to look at high performance is, how do I achieve that and get the full potential out of my people? So I'm getting what I can actually do, because we pay people 100% of their salary. But in many companies, and a lot of the mining companies I worked with in Perth, they're achieving great results sustainably, but they're probably getting 60% out of most of their people.
Mate, you've just put up a mirror to me and something that I was doing. Okay, so 18 months ago when I was running Offshore Talent, one of the other businesses before I came to do VBC full time, to be honest, I would think that I was a delegating, creating freedom leader, but on reflection, I wasn't, to the point where I would even go in and update or edit PowerPoint slides. I don't like this slide, I'm adjusting it. And then when I found problems, I would start picking at the scabs, and I would dive in and I would try and fix that problem. And then ultimately, it wasn't until Sean, the new CEO, came in, and I actually worked for him for 6 months to sort of let him take over the ropes and to sort of just support him as I could, until I realized I needed to leave the business and get out the way to get my sort of shadow off the place. Yeah. The first thing I saw about Sean was Sean's like, to his team, his leadership team, no, I don't do your job. I empower you to do your job. Yeah. And then instantly I was just like, oh my gosh, like mind blown. Everything that I was taught in the army, everything that, mission command and all this stuff, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it in my own businesses. Yeah. And even in conversations that I have with him now, is like, he will even let, his team, even though he has the skills and the expertise to be great at their job, he doesn't do their job for them. And he lets them build their plans, and then he tests and adjusts and guide. And this is where I think, again, ego, when you're transferring out of the military and you think you're a leader because I had rank or I did this or deployed or whatever, understanding the limitations and watching another great leader do it, it was really, and the things you're talking about now are exactly what I was not doing. So I think it's really enlightening. Yeah.
And there's another element with it when it comes to, and I've been exactly in your shoes. When I first became a section commander, I was a good infantry soldier. I knew how to do it. I could tell people how to do their jobs. No worries whatsoever. But part of that, and how to plan a mission, how to structure an attack, and all those sort of things. But what it relies on as well is that you have to be right. Yeah. You have to be correct every single time. And it also, there's an element of where the ego kicks in, which is that the arrogance in a way that they can't do it better than me. When reality, the 10 people in your team are smarter than combined, are smarter than you ever will be. It's impossible for one brain to outperform 10. So if we keep doing the work for them, we limit their potential. And sure, sometimes the solution that they get might be 80% of what you did, but they're 100% invested in that. they hold themselves to account. They've got ownership of that. And that matters more because over time, they will become better.
And you said something really important there as well. And again, it was a reflection of me, was the ability to identify the right talent for where the company is at this time, not where the company was at that time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had personal relationships with people that had been there through the start, that I was somewhat bound to them by them coming on the journey and them helping build it. However, these decisions that I was making, not only my penchants to meddle and my penchants to be the subject matter expert and build it the way I wanted to, and the ability to not let go of people who had reached their limits or seek the best talent always, just constrain the business. I get out the way, new CEO comes in, he builds his own team, gets the right performers into the right roles, business takes off and explodes. So it's just, I'm sort of saying this stuff for other people hopefully out there listening, that they might be feeling the same way, and that there is ways through this, because if you're not in the financial position to go out and hire a CEO, you need to step up and do something about your own leadership skills, and then to take yourself and your business to the next level.
Yeah. I think also the other element, if you've got a team of leaders below you, invest in them. You mentor them, build the next great leader out of them, because otherwise we wait too late, and then they're in a position of much more responsibility, and all of a sudden we're desperately trying to backtrack and actually give them the training that they needed. I work with a few organizations that have been investing in their most junior level leaders for over 5 years now. It's incredible. There's been the turnover that they experience is so small, and it's especially compared to many, but they've got, most of their promotions are coming from internal to the organization. The engagement at the operational level, because they're junior leaders, some of the people that are going to influence the culture of your organization more than anything else, those junior leaders are the ones that need to also get invested in.
And the multiplication of productivity or profitability, or the compounding effect, once the shackles are left off and leadership is let free to do what it's supposed to do, is it's just always something that's fascinating to me as I try and watch and develop myself. Tell us about K6. Now, who are you working with, and what are the products that you're offering? Because you've got this wealth or depth of not only technical but practical and highly complex leadership. How do you express that for your clients?
Yes. So I definitely don't rely on, this is what I did, do it my way, because I think that's a very flawed way of teaching leadership. The first company I worked with when I left the military, everything that they did was based off behavioral science, neuroscience, and psychology. So I spent 2 years getting a really in-depth understanding of these fields when it comes to actual leadership, and also having to learn how to make my experiences actually relevant to people. You see quite a few military consultants out there talking about leadership in combat and how it relates to the boardroom. It doesn't. If you're talking about leadership in a firefight, half of the human problems that you actually have to deal with as a leader don't exist. People are really, really motivated. People really want direction, and people really want to get and it's a very clear objective. But it's all of that 99% of what happens before you reach that point that I think is the most important part. How do we build a team that does perform in combat or whatever the situation is? So at the moment, when I started, I was definitely supposed to choose a niche industry that I was going to work with, and I tried to originally, but I currently work across a huge range of industries, from accounting, construction, engineering, or plenty others. And I work with leadership teams, and I run usually about a 8 to 10 month program where I work with the team once a month over that period of time. And we go through a program that starts off working on the most foundational level parts of leadership, which is things like, which I call self-mastery. There's no point in us teaching leaders how to navigate conflict or have a difficult conversation if they first can't stay cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah.
If they keep doing things that go against the organizational goals at a personal level. So the first third of it is based on that self-mastery. The next third is how do leaders build trust and influence? So both down and as well as also with stakeholders and also leading up. How do we become really, really effective at influencing people? Because that's what leadership is about. And then the last third is about organizational impact. That's where we're talking about some of the more technical aspects of leadership, team forming, difficult conversations, navigating conflict, decision-making and planning and things like that. And we work usually with a leadership team. So we've got a common language and the team gets to really become very cohesive throughout that period of time. The reason I do the once a month instead of doing a 5-day workshop or a 2-day workshop is because those one-off leadership workshops, I'll nearly say always, don't result in sustained behavioural change. It's a one-off sugar hit. People enjoy it, get a little bit out of it, but I guarantee within a month, they're back to leading the way they always have.
I was thinking that just straight away, like you could go into a meeting and share a few worries, like things that you did here and there and gunfights and things like that and excite everybody. And I'm sure you've got numerous stories we can go in there. But again, what is the enduring solution? It's one thing to come in and go, man, that dude was such a good speaker and wow, hasn't he had some adventures versus like deep rooted change, which is what we're really engaging you for here.
Absolutely. And just most of my stories about my mistakes I made, to be honest. I very, very rarely tell stories about things that I've done well, and I don't have any stories about combat because I just don't think that that's relevant for most organizations. But and that's why I've sort of started my own company, because I'm genuinely care about trying to get building leaders. I think leadership is one of the most important roles, professions out there because of the impact you can have on people. A great leader does shift people's lives, and people reflect on that leader 10 years later and still talk about how that person shaped their career. So I think it's something that I'm very, very passionate about and I love doing. And part of that is actually getting results that change people, that actually create sustained change over time.
I love actually there's your sort of hesitation to just get into sharing the worries and like be a little less voyeuristic from our perspective in terms of sticky beaking on significant events in your life. One of my mates, Vedran Maslik, this pod used to be called the Military Mindset for Business Pod, right? Because I thought we can relate lessons from the army to business and that kind of thing. And he called me up on the pod one day and he's just like, they're separate, man. Warfare is terrible. Warfare is atrocious and horrible, but it's something that happens for a purpose. And the parallels between it and business should be separated, not brought together.
Yep.
Even though you as a leader have been developed through your experiences, I think we, again, and shout out to Maz for calling me out on this, we don't necessarily want to link the two too closely because they are very, very distinct. Even like sport, going to war with the other team, that we got to break some of these narratives.
Absolutely. I think warfare is an incredibly unique and, as Maz said, horrible thing.
Yep.
And there aren't a huge amount of overlaps. What there is a huge amount of overlaps in is how you can build a team to function and survive in that, because what going into those sort of environments does is it puts a huge amount of human pressure on your team. Your team will be stressed, not just in the moment, but afterwards. And how does as a leader, how do you have those difficult conversations while still building trust and building a relationship? How do you maintain incredibly high standards while still having people that genuinely enjoy working for you and genuinely want to succeed because of you as a leader?
Before we wrap up, I'm just interested in the functionality or how effective a toolkit is, right? So for example, you get taught CMAP, you get taught, a rapid appreciation process or something like that. How important for you is giving people the tools, the templates, the viewy tui of leadership versus some of the softer factors of what they're trying to achieve from leadership?
Yep. I think that the frameworks, because there is a million out there when it comes to leadership, from everything from how to have a difficult conversation to how to plan and so on. They are the starting point. And I think they can be a starting point, but they have to be adjusted and adapted for your leadership style, your team, and your situation. Yep. So I always say during my workshops, like if I do talk about a framework, do not ever just roll that out rote. And we'll spend time, most of the workshop is facilitation. How do we make this relevant for something you can apply to your team? Often they are great little tools to start with as a leader. If you've never had to have a difficult conversation before, and you quickly can just Google something and pull out a little framework about, maybe I follow these steps for having a difficult conversation. It can be a really good starting point for people, but it takes that experience, that iteration, coaching and reflection to make that something that is useful for you, to make you not just a good leader, but a great leader. So that's, yeah.
I want to just wrap with your reflections and probably the best parallels between the two lives that you've got now. And just to finish up, what's next for you, both as James, the individual, and K6 Consulting?
So what was the first bit? Some of the strongest parallels?
The first bit was just like you're probably the biggest lesson for leadership that you've brought across from the military, whether it be a tool, a technique, a way to hold yourself, and then what's next for you?
Well, there's so many things that I'd like to talk about here, and when I do get asked this, I always reflect afterwards. I say what I should have said, but I'm going to go with what I do often say is one of the most important things that I learned in the military that I think that I take out now, and I sort of help with leaders, is the most important thing is understanding what's actually in your control. It's understanding what's outside, and that if there is a framework for that. It's called the spheres of control, but too often we focus on things that are outside our control, and we spend so much of our brain power focused on that rather than accepting that there's nothing we can do about that and looking at what we can actually control to influence those sort of outcomes. And I find that leaders often do spend too much time thinking about things that are completely outside their control and not being able to, and that impacts then how we prioritize our effort.
You know, that's a really pragmatic way of creating a successful outcome right now. You know, I can control this, I can fix this. What can we do right now to move the needle or, to advance the situation?
Yeah.
Rather than getting ourselves in a flustered state of everything that we can't control.
Yeah.
Matt, I love that. It's actually got me thinking about what my priorities are over the next day, because I'm chasing too many rabbits and see how many I catch. But mate, James, I just wanted to say thanks for, first of all, I don't want to say thank you for your service because it's not something that we actually say in Australia, but for you and the special forces, brethren and sisterhood of people that went and did that stuff, I guess I'd like to say, just like to acknowledge it, acknowledge that the weight that you and your teams carried during that time, not only for the nation, but for us in uniform in different roles. I've probably got some of my gongs are the same color as yours. However, they are earned extremely different. So I just probably just want to acknowledge that, for the warfighting, brethren out there and the people that support them. Mate, I love the work that you're doing in K6. Crack on, and mate, what's next for you personally?
Probably the biggest thing, I've got a 5-month-old son at the moment, so that is around about 98% of my effort at the moment.
How's the sleep?
Shocking, non-existent. Pretty much. We haven't struck it lucky with that yet. So, but no, that's really shifted how I look at things. And as far as how that impacts my business, my family is always my biggest priority. So the business works around that.
Brilliant. Well, mate, let's wrap it there. K6 Consulting will have all of James's contact details and how you can get in touch with him and get in touch with the business in the show notes. My name's Pete Liston. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Business Community Podcast. James, thank you for your time especially.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks for what you're doing.
All right, take care, everybody. We will chat to you later. Pete Liston, out.